Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome everybody. This is actually my first time hosting, I guess, a training meeting. So there's definitely going to be a learning curve here for me as well. I know many of you. I want to make sure that as everybody logs on here, that we're able to one, get video, and two, that we're able to mute and unmute our buttons here so that everyone can. Our goal here, our goal as in Keri and I's goal, is to obviously to create an atmosphere in which we can all feel comfortable enough to be able to communicate with each other and be able to share our experiences from one another. And I know this is different. This is a learning curve for everyone to be involved with these online Zoom trainings. But it may be a new normal for a while anyways. But we're excited. We're always humbled to be here. I am personally I'm always learning from each one of you, and I'm humbled to actually be sitting in this seat to be able to hopefully share some of my ideas with each of you. So with that being said, again, be patient with me. If I seem a little out of sorts here, I've been away from the office for a couple weeks. Both my parents actually tested positive for COVID and have been fighting that for the last 2 weeks now. I was exposed to them, but my test came back negative. But my parents, they are, my dad's high risk, but they're both doing surprisingly well. And I think my dad's on day 14 and my mom's on day 10 today. So never had to go to the hospital, and a lot of crazy symptoms, but doing well. So I'm just getting back into the office, like I said, and trying to get things put together. And I didn't have a lot of my training materials at home to work with. Fortunately, all of this happened over a weekend, and all my stuff was sitting here in the office, and nothing I can do about it. So with that being said, what we'd like to do, again, Keri and I have talked in depth about what we as within human resources and risk management would like to provide to our supervisors throughout the city. And we've had a lot of discussion about the value and the importance of consistency in these trainings, where our hope is to do this once a month to cover various applicable topics that have come up that are of concern. But we want everyone to, one, feel comfortable, but understand that we are all a part of a team, that we are all continually learning. Many of us have been supervisors for many years, if not decades. Others may be brand new to being a supervisor, and everyone's input is valuable, and we're all here to learn from each other's experiences. And Keri and I both personally want everyone to know that this is a safe place to share, to hopefully have some good discussion, and to learn from one another. The other thing that Keri and I are going to be doing this morning is we're going to be writing down names of those who do participate. And she's got some gift cards to Cubbies that we'll be handing out to those who do participate in this morning's discussion. Again, like I said, this is a little awkward for me, and I'm sure it may be a little awkward for some of you. I personally would rather see your faces in person, but nonetheless, I'm just grateful to be able to have this opportunity to visit online with everybody. So with that, let me pull up my presentation here. Can everyone see my screen, understand, and then influence? Is anyone who can't? Keri, can you see it?
I can't see it, Jason.
I can't either. I cannot also either.
Okay, hold on.
Now I can.
I can see it now.
Okay, we got it?
Yep.
Okay. Again, thanks for your patience. Definite learning curve here. So, I've had the opportunity to put a lot of thought into this topic. It's based on Stephen R. Covey's the fifth habit: seek first to understand, then to be understood. But getting into this, the first thing I'd like to talk about is this first slide here. So great news, you're a supervisor. Now what? I'd like for each of you to think back, however long ago that was, when you accepted your first position as a supervisor, whether that was here at Orem City or whether that was a job long time ago.
Charles, come on.
Regardless of what your job description said at that time, what are some of the feelings? What did you personally feel was your role or responsibility as a supervisor as you stepped into those shoes?
Jason, this is Evelyn.
Yeah.
I think it's common for people to wonder if they really are capable of doing the position. There's sometimes feelings of inadequacy, sometimes feelings of excitement to take on the role, but there can be self-doubt.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Evelyn. So self-doubt, can I do what I just signed up for? What I accepted? What else? What are some other feelings that you had? Go ahead, Travis.
I was real young when I started supervising, and one of my challenges was a lot of the people I supervised were older than me, and that can create, different levels of concern, but also different challenges, unique. Some people would think, well, why is he the supervisor? I've been here for a long time and he doesn't know what he's doing, or just natural barriers that come maybe with an age difference. But I'll just share a quick experience in this role. I had an employee who was older than me, and right off the bat, as I was working with this individual, he would go out, take a break each night, and take a smoke break right outside the facility, which happened to be a school, which wasn't legal. He wasn't far enough away to be smoking, but within, a couple other times checking on him when I couldn't find him, he actually was smoking weed with his buddy. He'd have a friend that would come and they would smoke weed right by the school in the parking lot. So that created challenges. But I think sometimes, just as Evelyn said, I mean, you're new to a situation, or you're new to potentially the challenges that come with being a supervisor, and it can be scary. It comes with a lot of different challenges. So anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. What were some of the things that you hope to accomplish as a supervisor in your role as a first-time supervisor? What were some of the things that you hoped you could do?
This is Rita Christensen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Rita.
Oh, okay. Similar to what Evelyn has said, and I'm also Travis. I was young, so I'm 23. I had a master's degree really early because I graduated from high school super early. And I'm out in Missouri, and I'm supervising individuals who are older also. And the thing is at the time in Provo, where I got my degrees, it was pretty techy even back in the 80s. So in Missouri, the people that I was supervising, they didn't even know how to use computers. And so, and I had, even though I had a library science degree and a design degree, I had started really early using computers and coding and stuff like that. And so we were implementing computers into we went from a typewriter in the early 90s to computers. And so what I hope to accomplish was help my employees learn essential functions of their job, which is now, right? It is essential to use a computer, and it's really important for us to access information, is to be able to use a computer effectively and learn search strategies. So that was one of my goals. I had already understood. We had computers in the library. We transitioned in the late 80s and 90s at BYU. And so by the time I left, maybe it was like 3 years later, that's what the employee said. What I learned from you, there were other things that I learned from them as well. So, because they were older, so I learned some things from them. But they said, like, learning how to use a computer and understanding technology was one of, they felt like was one of my main influences.
Okay. And thank you, Rita. And you hit a very important note there about influencing, about mentoring. I want to talk about influencing for a second. What does it mean to influence? Define influence. Is that just getting our staff to comply, getting our staff to do what we want them to do? Or is there more to it? How would you define the term influence as far as a supervisory role?
Hello, this is Chris. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Chris.
Okay. What comes to mind is just being an example yourself, trying to do the things that they have to do too. And if we are the example, then I think we're influencing them to do what we really want them to do, and be an example to them by doing it too. I don't know.
Okay.
That's what comes
No,
to my mind.
Perfect. And when I think of influence, I hope, it's my desire that ultimately I have an impact on that individual for the good. Obviously, that can go in either direction, for the good or for the bad, but an impact to the point that it affects their decision making, it affects how they see their role in what they do within the organization. Now, I want to ask each of you a question. Here's this quote that I love. Before I can walk in another's shoes, I must first remove my own. What does that mean to you in your role as a supervisor?
Really, I think it means you are kind of shedding your own biases and your own opinions so that you can try and look through someone else's, try and see their point of view a little bit more clearly and not through your own lens.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments?
This is Tara.
Go ahead, Tara.
For me, I had been alone for a long time before I became a supervisor, and so I felt a lot of ownership over what I did. So when the next person came in and sometimes they wanted to do things a little different or they had ideas, it was a real challenge for me in the beginning, but they were very patient with me to help me to get to where I could go, okay, even though I've always done it this way and I think it's the right way, I'm willing to see your way too. And there have been some good improvements because I was able to do that, but it took some training on my part to be able to let go of things a little bit.
Okay, so there's got to be some flexibility. Stephen R. Covey came across and taught a similar concept. He said the key to having influence with another person is to first be influenced. So how does my ability to be influenced affect my efforts to influence?
Jason, this is Shar. I think if you can in some cases, maybe drop a little bit of ego or a little bit of presumption that you know all the information that you want, or that you have all of the pieces to the puzzle that will guide your team in the perfect direction. Then you can learn from others who are doing things that you don't do every day, who have seen and experienced things that you haven't seen or experienced, and that all of that can come together to help you build a team together. That's what you're really trying to do. You're trying to lead a team to accomplish hopefully shared goals and a shared mission, but you're going to have some give and take between both any leadership in that team and all of the team members.
Perfect. Thank you. That's perfect. As a coach, you are leading a team. We don't live in a world where just because I have the title of a supervisor, I have all the answers and they're all the right answers to every scenario. There was a risk manager mentor of mine, and I know I've shared this with some of you. She always says that she keeps a box of crayons on her desk. And I'm like, why do you keep a box of crayons on your desk? And she's like, it helps me remember that every individual is uniquely different. Just as when you open a box of crayons, there's a different color. There's several dozen different colors in that box. And each color is unique, but each color contributes something very unique, something very special to the greater whole. Stephen R. Covey said, to be influenced, now this is his definition, to be influenced means you're open to others, open to what they are saying and feeling. In other words, you understood them. When someone feels understood, they are then open to understand you. They're open to be influenced. But until they feel understood, nothing else will work with them. Because inside, they will always say, he or she doesn't understand. Any of you ever felt that way about a manager or supervisor, that you've said to yourself, well, they just don't understand. They don't understand what I do. They don't understand what I deal with day to day. Do you think anyone has ever said that about you as a supervisor, that you don't understand them? So what does it mean then to understand? Covey continues, when you understand another, you've accepted them. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but that you have accepted them as a thing of worth, people worth listening to. You value them, or you wouldn't have spent so much time trying to understand them. I want to invite each of you just to reflect in the past supervisor or even a coworker that truly took the time to understand you in your role as an employee. How did that change the way that you saw that person? Does anyone have any experiences with that, where they've truly felt understood, that someone took the time to understand or to be open to what they were saying and feeling? How did that make you feel?
This is Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
When Jay was our supervisor here in our office for quite a few years, he was one. Well, he was in the trenches. He saw what we do. He sees the problems that would come up and the things that we would need, and he would listen, and he would go to the people that he needed to talk to change things or to bring things into our office that we needed to make our job easier. And he was just always validating our feelings here, because we were all women. He was the only man in here, and he was very understanding of our feelings and what we were trying to accomplish in our various goals here, and he just validated us all the time, and he just made us feel he was listening, and he would change things that we needed or bring things into our office that we needed.
Thank you. You know, one of my personal experiences was with Richard Manning, and I know, again, if you've attended the workshop 7 Habits, I probably shared this with you guys, but this was a very impactful scenario that happened to me and Richard, where a few years back, my dad, who has a whole list of health problems, he'd had a surgery and had some major complications, some pulmonary embolisms, and so I had missed a lot of work and was in and out of the office on a regular basis. And we had a regularly scheduled staff meeting coming up, and at the same time there was a heavily weighted risk management issue that needed to be addressed. And I knew I was kind of getting behind on certain things with that, and was worried about that. And as I get back into the office for this staff meeting, again, I'm just frantically trying to get this whole risk management issue ironed out. And as we start this staff meeting, I knew that Richard, as my boss, as my director, was going to want answers, was going to want to dive right into that work-related issue. And I hadn't seen Richard for about a week and a half, and so everyone just kind of chit-chatted for a minute, and then he started in with a review of each staff item, and he's like, "All right, let's start with risk management." And he's like, "First things first." And then I, as he said that, I kind of, open up my notes, and I'm ready to present this issue on risk management. And then he pauses and he said, "How's your dad?" And at that point, everything changed for me in regards to the way that I saw Richard. I felt understood by him, and it meant a great deal to me. So with that, what I'd like to do is ask each of you, rhetorical question here, thinking of your staff currently, the people, your subordinates, people that you work with day in and day out, that you supervise, have you allowed yourself to be influenced, again, as per Steve Covey's definition of influenced, by your staff? I'm not talking about adopting their bad habits. Again, we're talking about being open to your employees, to their feelings, their thoughts and opinions. Have you allowed yourself to be influenced by your staff? Now, I know we've kind of briefly discussed this, but again, let's try to dive a little bit deeper here. What are the challenges, again, as per that definition, what are the challenges we face with being influenced? So going back here to Covey's definition, we're open to others, open to what they are saying and feeling. What is the challenge with that? If it's as easy as that, why don't we do it? What are some of the obstacles that stand in our way of taking that time to listen to what people are saying and feeling?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Christina. I know a challenge that comes to mind kind of immediately is when you're seeking to understand the other person, but the other person doesn't want to be understood, or there's like a barrier in communication. There's a barrier in kind of getting to connect in a way that you can truly understand them and kind of work with them to meet their needs. So at least that's one thing that I think about.
And that's, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper here too, but Stephen Covey talks about paradigms, how we all see the world differently based on hundreds of different influencing factors in our lives, whether that's how we were raised or where we were raised, or and we'll share that quote, "We see the world not as it is, but as we are." And so we need to understand that everybody is different. And with that, we have different personalities. Again, going back to the crayon box analogy, we all have a different color. That in itself can be very challenging. What else? What other challenges do we face?
Jason, Mike here.
Yeah.
I think as supervisors and leaders, one of the things that we fear, or people don't want to put themselves out there because they don't want to be in a vulnerable state, but to really kind of understand and influence, you kind of have to be vulnerable to let your guard down so you're able to learn about these, your subordinates or different people. And so that could be a scary situation for a lot of people, because when you're vulnerable, that means you're allowing yourself to, you're susceptible, right? So, but I think to be able to, meet that goal of influencing that you're talking about, we've got to be vulnerable, right? So we can have that opportunity to connect.
You're correct. I mean, it can be very scary. I think a lot of times things that have, I guess, forced me to hesitate in having that conversation that can be somewhat awkward. What if they ask me a question that I don't have the answer to? Or what if what if the drama that's connected with it is just way over my head? What if I can't control that? And so there is a lot of fear in that vulnerability of not knowing what to do or how to do it. Good comments. What else? What else is a challenge that keeps us from being influenced?
This is Rita. Probably some management on my own end, and that is making time. I've got to make time to connect with people and be influenced or be an influencer. And sometimes that is challenging.
Okay, in life, I don't have to explain it to any of you. We all know that we live a life, especially nowadays, where we're just running and gunning. We're just going 100 miles a minute, trying to get everything done, living a life of efficiency based on the clock. We're going to get more into that. The other thing that I wanted to add that I thought of was pride. Again, Mike kind of hit this, but our objectives. Sometimes we push an agenda. We want, we have the mentality that, well, if I want it done right, I got to do it myself. And so we push and push and push and push and push our own objective, not considering the differences of others. And again, that others may have even better ideas, where it's almost easier to shoot for a win-lose scenario. I win, you lose, rather than a win-win in that relationship. Just out of ease. It's just easier to be right. It's easier to not have that conversation. Again, if we're basing our life on efficiency based on time, then it's just quicker to just do what I want, right? To do what I say. I say jump, you say how high, we move on. I'd like to talk about three things that I've determined to be our natural tendencies that I've noticed, not only in life, but obviously in the workplace. The first one is that we have a natural tendency of listening with the intent to respond, not with the intent to understand. This is a very active tendency in my home with my teenage daughters. I'm always listening with the intent to respond. I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to win, you're going to lose, rather than with the intent to truly understand them. This happens a lot in the workplace. Again, whether it's a pride thing, whether we're just really pushing an agenda or an objective. I don't want your opinion. I just want, you to go along with it. And so we listen with the intent to respond. The second one, again, is the efficiency with people is determined by time and schedules. We're always looking at our calendars. We're just running and gunning, like I said. And the third one, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. These are things that we naturally get into the habit of. We establish these habits of just with the natural day-to-day responsibilities, roles, and duties of our job. We kind of create these own little bubbles that we live in. So I put together 3 things that we can do. Let me get my notes here. 3 points of advice in our effort to be more effective in our efforts to influence as supervisors. The first one is to listen much more than you speak. That's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We're to listen twice as much as we speak. Practice empathic listening, a structured listening and questioning technique that allows you to develop and enhance relationships with a stronger understanding of what is truly being conveyed, both intellectually as well as emotionally. A lot of times, I use this example from my mother. My mom, and most mothers in this case, have a special gift of empathic listening, meaning they can read your body language, your aura, whatever you're radiating, they can sense it, they can feel it. And I consider myself to be a pretty good liar in the sense that if someone asks me, hey, how's it going? Our natural response is, oh, things are great, things are good. And I try to pull that over on my mom. She'll ask me, how are things? And I said, oh, they're good. And her next comment all the time, Jace, are you lying to me? and that's, she knows that I'm lying to her, because she knows that's not what is truly being conveyed. And so empathy, I like this quote down here. Empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. Back to that original quote or slide that I shared. If removing my shoes before I can step into those of another, I have to be willing to, in a sense, see the world as they see it. But we're only going to be able to do that is if we listen, if we understand before we speak. Second one, people and then schedules. This is from Covey. He says we have to get into an entirely new frame of mind. With people and relationships, you can't be efficient. Again, efficiency is based on the clock, running and gunning. He says, he uses this quote all the time, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. What do you think that means?
This is Robin. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
I think that organizations tend to not place value on people, and they don't realize the payoff that comes from valuing employees. I know a lot of people speak very highly of Jim Reams based on the fact that he, would take time to know and invest in people. And I think that when you're quick and fast with people and you don't really invest in them and get to know them, your progress isn't nearly as effective, or you don't make as much progress. But instead, if you take the time to talk to people and get to know people and really invest in them and realize that they're important, they become more productive in turn. And if you take care of the people, they'll take care of the customers. And so I think it's so important as supervisors and even, government, whatever, to really invest in people and to take time to listen and get to know the people. Because even though it might take more time and effort up front, the output that you're going to get from it is so much greater.
Exactly. You can, for example, I can be efficient in a construction project. I can organize my time, my resources, such that we get as much done as quickly as possible, as effectively as possible. But when it comes to people and relationships, those of you who have teenagers or a difficult sibling, have you ever tried to be efficient with that relationship based on time? Can you force emotion? Can you force a paradigm shift of emotion with people, with individuals, with kids? So Covey's point here, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. if we are truly making the effort to find out, again, what is being conveyed both intellectually and emotionally, we're taking the time to do that. And once we do that, basically, we're getting right to the point. We're getting to the heart of the issue rather than, for lack of a better term, beating around the bush and making assumptions and guessing or naturally avoiding the issue at hand. That takes significantly longer to find a reasonable solution than if we go right to the point, address it, create a solution right out of the gate, and be able to move forward effectively. So again, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. That's why I always said people and then schedules. Don't be consumed by the clock or the calendar. Again, this is our natural tendency is to do that. So we have to act contrary to our natural tendencies. We need to be patient with people. Take the time to listen intently and make the effort to be involved. Kelby always says that you'll be amazed at how quick and how effective you can get to solutions together as a team, as supervisor and subordinate. The third one, avoid action based on personal assumption. I've always taught that in communication, there's a space or a void that must be filled with something, 100%. The space, when we communicate, the space has to be completely filled, and it's going to be filled with one of two things. Either it's going to be filled with understanding, or the opposite of that, assumption. Okay? So if there's a lack of understanding, say you got 20% understanding, the other 80% is going to be assumption. Or it's going to be, if there's no communication whatsoever, it's going to be all assumption. And we know all too well what happens with assumptions. They evolve into these monsters that spread like a wildfire. Understanding that we're all different. This quote, our greatest strength as a human race is our ability to acknowledge our differences. Our greatest weakness is the failure to embrace them. How do we embrace our differences? We all know that we have differences, but how do we embrace them effectively? At least, how do you embrace differences?
This is Chris again. First of all, condolences to all you that are raising teenagers. I'm past that time. Now my kids are raising teenagers, and they're going, Mom, how did you do it? So
yeah,
what goes around comes around. Let me tell you. But anyway,
Amen.
I think the saying how a person's perception is their reality, and I think I'm probably older than all of you on this call right now, but it's so true. If we can just look at what they're saying and hear them and realize that's their perception of how they're seeing whatever it is that we're discussing or trying to change, and we have to just look at the person and realize that's their perception, that's their reality. Even though we don't agree with it or we don't understand why they see it that way, we have to try to look into the way they're seeing it and try to work it out in how we can see it the same way. Because if we assume that they should just understand how we're looking at things or how we want to change this or that, and they don't see it quite the way we see it, we have to understand and try to, me, myself, and I personally like everyone's input because I don't want to be blamed if something doesn't work out. I want to get all their input. I want to, see what they see, because I may not see it either or see it that way. And then our supervisor, we like to get his perspective on it, and then we go from there. So I just think we just all have, which we do, we talk about it and we see exactly how we need to change something in our office, or and be personable with each one of the people. I like to know what's going on in their life. I like to know their goods and their bads and their uglies, and really get into their life and understand what they're going through. And they listen to me, and it's we just have a nice office that way, so because we kind of know each other, or we've known each other for a long time, and it just,
Well,
I don't know.
no, it definitely makes for a more positive workplace in which we're excited to come to work. We know people that trust us, that support us, and we support them, and we work together literally as a team. I think right now, unfortunately, we seem to live in a world of I'm right and you're wrong. And that's why I put this quote here at the bottom. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so I encourage each of you to take a step out of your bubbles, okay? Look at the world differently. Attempt to be influenced by your employees. Move away from our natural tendencies. It's difficult. I'm not gonna lie. It's difficult. It's challenging. Again, our nature, our natural tendencies. That's what we do. It's like asking a fish to walk. But we can do it. We all can do it. I like this quote here at the end. This is actually from George Washington Carver. This applies to everybody. It says, "How far you go in life depends on your being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant of the weak and strong. Because someday in your life, you will have been all of these." So that concludes my portion of the training. I want to thank everyone for your participation. Again, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and turn the time over to Keri to continue with her portion of the training. So again, thank you, everybody. Keri, you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. While I'm getting that set up, we will have a little exercise during this. So if you have a minute to just grab a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, you'll need it here in just a minute. Okay, so this goes hand in hand with what Jason was just discussing about understanding people before you, and make connections with people before you try and have them work for you in a way that's beneficial to the city and to you as a supervisor as well. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and then we'll talk a little bit about avoiding discrimination in the workplace. Just like Jason said at the beginning of his piece of this presentation, we are all a team. So this is a safe place for us to share. We're all continually learning. So if you have something to share, that we will all be better off by learning from your experiences. Your input is valuable. And again, this is a really safe place to share. So if you have concerns or any advice for any of us on any of these topics, it's a great time for you to share with us. And beside that, I'm also taking note, and Jason is as well, of those who are participating in the presentations, and we will be sending out Cubby's gift cards to those of you who participate. So if you want free lunch, make sure that you help participate today. So I will reference quite a few pieces of information and some topics and websites and articles. So just so that you know, I will be sharing these references that I talk about today, as well as the slide deck of Jason and myself slide decks later today, as well as the recording from this presentation, so that if you wanted to go back and listen to anything or wanted to do any research on your own, you'll have the ability to do that as well. So one thing that's really astounding to me is that we all make about 35,000 decisions in a single day. So that's approximately one decision every 2.5 seconds. So to me, that's just mind-blowing to even think about on how our brains can even process that much information. And how we do that is partially through unconscious bias. Does anyone know what that means? Well, good, then we're gonna all learn well together today. So we'll watch a video here that discusses what unconscious bias is.
How do you decide who makes the team, who gets an opportunity, and who gets cut? We want to believe that we think rationally and objectively, that all of our motivations are pure and free from biases, but we know that's not always the case because of our potential blind spots. Blind spots, or unconscious biases, are mental shortcuts that help us make sense of the millions of pieces of data we take in each day. They can potentially influence our decisions. Not all biases are bad. It's normal to have a favorite sports team or food or prefer being around your own family. Having a bias doesn't always mean you're against something. In fact, the halo effect means exactly the opposite. It's when you favor a person based on a positive first impression. In your mind, they can do no wrong, even when they prove otherwise. And assuming someone will be great at absolutely everything can actually end up setting them up for failure. The Horns effect happens when someone is defined by a negative first impression. No matter what they do, they can't shake it. Halo and horns often carry over into other areas and color all the ways we see and experience someone. The halo and horns effects can also be reinforced by confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we look for evidence that supports our beliefs and ignore evidence that contradicts them. Let's take a little test. What rule defines this number sequence? Now that you've got your rule in mind, can you come up with a series of numbers that also fit that rule? What about these? Which sequences fit? If you said 20, 22, 24, you'd be wrong. Actually, all of them fit. The simple rule was that the numbers got bigger. It's likely that your unconscious mind quickly saw a pattern of even numbers that go up by 2, and that narrowed your thinking. This shows that confirmation bias can rob us of other possible solutions. Numerous studies have shown that people are more likely to seek out information that confirms a belief and disregard information that doesn't. One study found that people spent over 36% more time reading articles that confirm their beliefs. In the business world, this habit could end up squashing innovation before it starts. So what can we do when we're wired to hang on to halo, horns, and pay more attention to things that confirm our beliefs? How can we counteract our unconscious bias? The first step is to be open. Try not to let one shining moment or one speed bump sway your opinion forever. Make sure you look at all the evidence objectively. Play your own devil's advocate and seek out contradictory views. And slow down your thinking. Ask questions and bring in other perspectives to expand your point of view. When we recognize our blind spots, that's when we can get beyond halo and horns. That's when we can overcome confirmation bias. And that's when we can see people for who they are and who they can become.
Okay, so here's another example of an unconscious bias. So in the 1970s, the top orchestras in the US, there were only 5% of women that represented the total orchestras in the US. So at the time, there were a lot of reasons that people explained that behind, and they would say women have smaller techniques than men, or that women are more temperamental and more likely to demand special attention or treatment, or that women had a poorer sound when it came to an orchestra. One conductor said once in the 1970s that I just don't think women should be in the orchestra at all. So in the early 2000s, orchestras were up by almost 30%. And the reason being is because orchestras decided to do blind auditions where musicians were literally auditioned behind a curtain so that the panel couldn't see them. Then they were only assessing their ability to do the sound and be able to play rather than what they looked like. So I thought that was kind of an interesting idea that when they weren't able to see who the candidate was, they made different decisions on who would be the best into the orchestra. Do any of you have any experience with any type of unconscious bias or an experience in the workplace or outside the workplace where maybe you were treated differently because of someone else's unconscious bias, or have you ever been a victim of having an unconscious bias against somebody else?
Hi, Keri, can you hear me?
I can.
So I don't know if this is necessarily negative, but it is what it is. So almost every single time that I have gone out for a job that I've gotten interviewed, because my name is Christina Reyes, no one assumes that I look the way that I look. When I go to doctor's offices, no one, I get called, Christina Reyes from the waiting room, and I'll get up and I'm like, present, and then they're like, no, we said Christina Reyes. So it's just the quickly, when you see a very Hispanic name, the image that comes to people's mind is not someone that looks necessarily like me. But again, not to say that this is like completely negative, but it is what it is.
Thanks, Christina. I really appreciate, whoops, that just bumped us up a whole bunch. Sorry about that. Hold on. Now you're going to see all my slides beforehand. Sorry about that. I agree with you. It's not necessarily a bad thing that they have that unconscious bias connected to that last name. It's just something that you notice, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's probably a little awkward sometimes when you are probably proud of your name and that unconscious bias creeps into maybe what you feel about what your identity is. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about diversity. And just so that you know, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, those are huge topics. We could spend days on discussing this in real depth. And so I apologize for this brief overview of all of this. But again, I'll be sending some more articles and some other information to you later today if you want to dive into this deeper. But diversity is the mix of people. So you can see a bunch of different ways that we look at diversity. The way that you identify yourself as your gender, your native language, your culture, your ability, your national origin, your gender, your appearance, your sexual orientation, your family status. There's lots of things that go into what makes us all individual, and we're all different from everybody, regardless of any of these specific things. All of us have something that we come to the table with, different experiences, different viewpoints that makes us all unique in our own way. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about myself. Are there any other fellow lefties in the group today? Does anyone recognize these scissors if you're a left-handed person? I know that there's at least one other person on the call that's left-handed, so they may have had the same experience as I did, but I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I am left-handed. I come from a family, both my parents are right-handed, but three of our five of us in our home are left-handed, which was really unusual. The first three children that were born to my parents were all left-handed. So I didn't think it was anything odd that I wrote with my left hand or anything until I went to kindergarten. And this was my first experience. I didn't go to preschool or anything, so kindergarten was my first experience in a classroom. and we had an activity where we had to cut with scissors. So the teacher brings out this big circular wooden display case that has all the scissors in it, and all the scissors look shiny and new except for one pair, and they have this green little handle on them and they say lefty on them. And I didn't know the difference between scissors. At home I'd always just use regular scissors, but the teacher knew I was left-handed and she told me I had to use these scissors, and they looked ancient to me, rusty and all old and everything. And I don't think the other children at the tables noticed that or anything, but to me it made me feel that I was different and that I didn't fit in. It was really awkward for me to use those left-handed scissors, and so I taught myself later to be able to use right-handed scissors with my left hand so that I didn't have to go up and take those green-handled lefty scissors so that I would be the same as everybody else. So that's just a real simple story to explain what it is to be diverse. Even though I looked physically like the other children, I had something different about myself, that I was left-handed. So for myself to fit in, I learned how to use the right-handed scissors, so I didn't have to use different scissors. So what I'd like you to do is pull out that piece of paper that we talked about a few minutes ago. And I want everybody to take just a minute and write down some things about you that are unique. Now, I did this for myself for a minute and I put these on this list here so that you can look at it. But what I'd like you to do is just write down some things that are unique about you. Other people might have some of the same things on their list, but as you're creating this list, you'll see what makes you unique. So if you'll just take 1 minute and just write down a couple of things about you that makes you unique. Oh, I keep doing that. Sorry about that. Okay, so does anybody have any that they feel comfortable sharing in our safe environment here? Anybody want to share part of their list with us? Remember, I have Covey's gift cards.
Okay, Keri, I'll speak up.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Being a cancer survivor is something that makes you part of a club. And even though each person's experience with the disease is very unique, you still share a common bond by going through that. And it's something that when I, for instance, am on Facebook and I see some comment from somebody who is struggling, I can reach out and just say what little I can say. But it's a profound experience in your life.
Thanks, Evelyn. I really appreciate that. I'm not a cancer survivor, but I did have a mother who was a cancer survivor for a long period of time, and she had that same feeling of that unity with other people that had been through a similar experience that she had. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, going off of that, this is Chris. My brother did have cancer. He is 10 years younger than me. He went through a lot. He was only 32 or something at the time, and he's 53. So he had only one kidney, and so almost 9 years ago, I was able to give him a kidney, and it was something that I could say was the easiest thing in my life. I could go through that again and again because it was the easiest thing, because it was something that I knew in the back of my mind for a good 10 years before he received it, that I would, because there's 7 siblings, including him, that I would be the one that was going to give it to him. And I'm the one that lives in Utah and everyone else lives in California. And it was just something we both knew. He knew it and I knew it. And so it's just a bond we have now, that I was able to help him through a very difficult time in his life, and it was easy. I have to say, it was easy. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate that. That's very insightful. I also wanted to mention too, in the group chat, if you don't have a mic, then you can't participate. Dan chatted, did a group message that just said that he flies small planes, but he doesn't like heights. So that's kind of interesting. Dan, I'm curious if that's you are in the plane or if it's like a drone, but I think it's probably a plane, but you don't like heights. That's interesting. That's always terrified me to go into a small plane. Anybody else?
This is Tara. My middle name starts with a Q, and I've never met someone else who has the same middle name because it's from a different language.
Hey, I like that. What is it?
Quay, Q-U-A. It's
Wow.
Prussian.
Wow, that's super cool. I like that. Oh, and Dan got back to me and said it's an actual plane. They're great. Ask Tom. Interesting. I think I'm too scared of heights to do something like that. Anyone else?
Yes, this is Justin, and I'm in Travis's office because I don't have a microphone in mine. But I like pickleball so much that I put one in my backyard.
Wow.
So that makes me unique.
Not only that, Justin.
Cost me a lot of money, yeah.
Not only that, but he loves pickleball so much, he's very competitive. And that's another thing that I know about you, Justin, is you're very competitive in a lot of things, right?
Yes,
but pickleball,
in everything, yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed that you and Ben had matching t-shirts, tank tops for our pickleball tournament. So that's awesome.
And it said champion on it. And we won, so there.
Did you win? You did win. That's awesome. So see, you already foreshadowing the future, right? Anybody else like to share anything? It doesn't need to be big, just something that you feel makes you a little different or special. One thing that I noticed was I was doing this exercise. I'm a middle child, so I have an older brother, older sister, and a younger brother, younger sister. So I'm a real true middle child. I worry so much about everybody being treated fairly. And that's bled over into my career. That's why I like doing what I do. for a career, is that that's something that I'm very passionate about, is making sure that everybody is treated fairly. So that was an interesting thing for me to learn about myself during this process. Okay.
This is Rita. Oh, this is Rita. I've got one. So I am biracial. I'm white and I'm Filipino. My Filipino side is very musical. I grew up listening to my grandpa be the pianist for Johnny Mathis since I was in the womb, you know, until my early years. And so I have some kind of strange musical abilities. Because of that, I also play the piano. When I hear water trickling, I oftentimes hear jazz music. For real. And I've never heard of anybody else that has that happen to them.
That's super cool. Maybe that came from, if you were listening to it in the womb, it just is a natural, like, fifth sense, maybe. Or sixth sense. Okay, so we know that we're all different. We all have different backgrounds, different perspectives and everything. So we know that we all have diversity here in the workplace. So the next thing is think about inclusion. And the inclusion is getting the mix. So all of us, all of our different backgrounds, all of our different views, all of our different histories, getting that mix to work together. So making sure that nobody feels like they're sitting on the outside, that we respect everybody's opinions and voices, including their backgrounds and orientations. There's lots of different things, including acknowledging that all of us are different, and the fact that we're all different in the workforce makes us better because we have different points of view, and it makes us more innovative. So going back to myself being left-handed, obviously I need to go to some therapy or something about being left-handed, but I'll tell you about a time, and then I'll open it up to other people if they wanted to share about a time that they did feel included or a time that they didn't. So I hate to be negative Nelly, but this is another poor experience of mine when I didn't feel included. So 10th grade English, my high school was 10th through 12th grade, so sophomores were the youngest in the high school. And I was in this 10th grade English class. It was, her name was Mrs. Beverly, and she had us do an assignment in class. It was an in-class writing assignment, and it was timed. And we had to write in cursive. So I'm writing this great story, and I'm really proud of the story. I remember what it was about. It was about growing up, and I always wanted to have a Mr. Potato Head toy. It's something that I always wanted, but Santa Claus never brought me a Mr. Potato Head toy. So I was writing about this. We turned in our assignment after the time, and then the next day, she's calling up students to share their stories. And so she calls up a couple of different people, and they tell their stories and everything, and they're fun, and everybody's proud of themselves for being able to stand up. And then she calls my name, and I'm thinking, wow, this is so great. I feel so valued that she enjoyed my story. So I go up to the front of the class, and she said, "Before you start, I just wanted to let you know that I feel like I have to stand on my head to be able to read your writing." And I didn't understand what she meant. And she said, "That's because you slant your cursive to the left instead of the proper way to the right. So I have to stand on my head so that I can read your writing." And then she took a piece of tape and placed my writing up on the blackboard so that people could look at it. And then she asked me to sit back down again. And I was just so embarrassed by that. And it bothered me for a long time. And for a long time, I never raised my hand or volunteered to participate in classes for a while because I just felt that I didn't belong. So that's a terrible example of not feeling included. Does anybody have an example as well, or a time when they did feel included?
Keri, I want to say, when I first started working here, I probably was the only non-LDS staff member at the library, and things would come up, and I had just recently moved to Utah too, and things would come up that kind of rankled. Over the years, I've just been so impressed by how our organization has changed in so many ways. We used to not have as many men working in the library as we do now. So we have more gender inclusivity. We have people of lots of different backgrounds and ages now. And it's just been a really positive change that I have felt over the years. And I've really benefited from knowing all these individuals as individuals. And we have great leadership in that respect too.
Thanks, Evelyn. I appreciate that. And I think that with Shar as the library director, I'm going to call you out for a minute, Shar. I think that she has this very good ability to see other people's skills and to be able to use those in a positive way. And I think the library is a very good example of inclusivity. I feel as if you guys have this pride in your work and the pride of being a team and being cohesive. So I think that my hats go off to everybody in the library and Shar for heading that initiative. So thanks, Evelyn, appreciate it. Okay,
That's
so
not me, Keri. That's others. They're the leaders. That's not me.
well, and see, that's another thing I like about you, Shar, is that you're very humble. That is true. You do have a great team that you work with, but at the same time, they take their cues from you. So I think that take credit where credit is due on that one. So the last thing after we talk about diversity and inclusion is something that's a little more recent that we discuss, and that's belonging. And that's the feeling where everybody in your team feels like they've been valued. So by unlocking that, you find your unique way of having your own team that works in their own way, but at the same time in a cohesive way where they feel like their voice is heard. There's this need that's genetically wired in each of us to feel like you belong somewhere. And when you have that feeling of belonging at work, you're more successful, you're a better cohesive team, you work harder, and there's less discontent. So that's just where we all want to end up, is just having these teams of belonging. And again, back to the library, I think that they are living in this realm in a lot of ways. I think that there's a lot of cohesion over there in the library. And I think that's true for a lot of our teams, probably most of our teams here at the city as well. Does anybody have any thing they'd like to share about their team, about what they do to make sure that everyone in their team feels like they belong?
Well, this is Chris. We always recognize each other's birthdays. We don't do a big thing, but we buy that person lunch and bring it in. That's one of the things we do, and we just bond and try to know each other and our lives, our personal lives, our family lives and things. And it just, I think the camaraderie we have is because we're interested in one another's lives.
Thanks, Chris. Oh gosh, I did that again. Sorry. I usually have to hit my space bar to move forward, but when I hit my space bar, it takes me way past my screen. Sorry. So
Keri, this is Shar, and I just wanted to kind of give a lesson learned as a leader when thinking about some inclusion activities, if you have just a second.
Yes, please.
So we've had a lot of things going on nationally, internationally this year. And, you know, I really got just a hard smack in the face as not being a good person, let alone a good leader, because there were people that were just really important to me in my life. And I had not reached out to see how they were doing with some of this heavy load. And, you know, some of that comes from a place of fear or a place of, you know, being raised to think that we're all the same, which is not exactly the right model for recognizing and appreciating everyone's differences. And so you kind of are a little paralyzed, and then you don't take action as a leader to make sure that people in your life, people on your team, people in your family, that they're doing okay with some of this stuff. And then you've missed an opportunity to be of service to someone, to be understanding to someone's point of view, and to understand more yourself from learning about their experience. So that was kind of a hard lesson that I learned this year, and I hope to do better with it. But sometimes as a leader, we let fear or we let other factors come into kind of connecting with someone on a personal level, or checking in on them, or making sure that we have the right understanding of how they're feeling.
Boy, I think that's so true. Sometimes I think that we have good intentions, but we don't know how to make it play out, right? I mean, if you feel that that you want to do some more inclusive action, but you don't at the same time want to offend that person that you're trying to be more inclusive to, I think that sometimes we do paralyze ourselves with fear and just take a step back and just keep the status quo instead of trying to improve our processes to be more inclusive. So I think that's very true. And I think all of us have experienced that, either professional or personally. So thanks for sharing that, Shar. So again, diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. So the goal is for us all to recognize that we're all different. We all come to the table with different experiences, different backgrounds. Inclusion is that everyone feels comfortable about their voice, and then belonging is the ability that everyone feels comfortable to share their voice. Okay, so we're gonna share just another video, and then we'll talk some more about how we can avoid discrimination in the workplace.
Boss is coming.
Can you take care of this for me?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Wait, let me guess. You get a very different mental picture in your head when I said boss. Did it look more like him? Don't worry, you're not alone. Our brains make automatic associations without us even realizing it. And while these associations help us make rapid-fire decisions, they can also be influenced by our potential blind spots. Prototype bias happens when we have a preconceived notion of who we think would be right for a particular role based on stereotypes. These mental pictures are based on who we've seen succeed in the past and can influence who we think will succeed in the future. Let's test the theory. Don't worry, just between us. I'm gonna say a word and I want you to point to the word on the screen that you most associate with it. Ready? Let's go. Delicate, powerful, caring, family, career, strong. What just happened? Well, if you're like most people, you associated communal words with female and assertive words with male, because those implicit associations are ingrained in our unconscious mind. A network of researchers from prominent universities developed the implicit association test. This test helps people identify their potential unconscious biases across a variety of dimensions. These types of ingrained associations can often shape our prototypes for who's qualified to lead in the workplace. Take the orchestra. When orchestras started conducting blind auditions in the 70s, the number of female musicians shot up 20%. So either women suddenly played exponentially better when behind the curtain, or the conductors weren't aware they had a prototype bias towards male musicians, and this bias was costing them talent. Another study found that the exact same resumes with more black-sounding names received 50% fewer callbacks than those same resumes with traditionally white names. The idea of prototype bias cuts even deeper than that. Studies show we often have prototypes for the people we believe would succeed in a job, and we may unconsciously change our criteria to help those people get the job. You may be thinking, I'm not like that. Well, the participants in a study on prototype bias thought the same thing. And ironically, those who thought they were most objective ended up being the most biased. Blind spots can span any dimension of diversity and can potentially lead to bad decisions. Not only can blind spots limit our own choices, they may result in missed opportunities that don't lead to the best possible outcomes. The good news is that there are ways to overcome prototype bias. You can start by setting objective criteria. This can help prevent you from being swayed by irrelevant factors. And you can double check your objectivity by sharing the why behind your decisions. Lastly, don't make assumptions based solely on your idea of fit, because when it comes to success, one size doesn't fit all.
Okay, so I just wanted to share a couple of statistics. By 2055, there will no longer be a majority race in the United States. Millennials seek purpose and diversity in their workplace. In meetings, 20 to 30% of your table are speaking 80% of the time. So what that means is we need to look at what voices are missing, especially when it comes to meetings. This is something that we can all work on. One article that I read recently was on the difference between gender roles when it comes to meetings between men and women. This was just something interesting that I found, that men tended to have less gap time between the time that there was a question and the time when a man would respond compared to a woman. Women like to make sure that there's enough time for other people to have an opportunity to share before they share. Also, women seem to be more succinct or to the point in meetings, just so that they can make sure that they get their point across without being interrupted, or just so that they don't take as much time up during the meeting, where men tend to feel that they have more authority or more ability to persuade people the longer that they speak. So I just thought that was something interesting. So what we need to think about is what we can do to bring the silent forward and to learn and grow from their perspective. So maybe in meetings that you have with your teams, you can identify those silent voices, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a gender or a race thing. It could just be someone who is more introverted, someone that doesn't feel as comfortable sharing or is concerned that maybe their ideas won't be as valid as others. But maybe just take a minute in your group meetings and specifically ask those silent voices if they have something to share, or give them an opportunity to have a responsibility during a meeting so that they feel more comfortable in presenting their ideas. Does anybody else have a good idea on how we can include more voices at the meetings? Okay, we will roll then. Let's talk a little bit now on the management side, how we can avoid discrimination in the workplace. So the EEOC has put out their best practices to avoid discrimination. On the general side, the idea is to promote an inclusive culture in the workplace by fostering an environment of professionalism and respect for personal differences, foster open communication and early dispute resolution, establish neutral and objective criteria to avoid subjective employment decisions based on personal stereotypes or hidden biases. And on that one, I'll speak to that more directly here in a minute, but there's some things that we are doing internally here to help avoid some of that subjectivity. On the recruitment, hiring, and promotion side, you want to consider the diversity of the pool of the candidates. You need to be looking at people during the recruitment, hiring, and promotion process of not people that are a cultural fit, but maybe a cultural add. Maybe someone who comes in with a little bit of a different experience or a little bit different diversity in your group, because they can add to the culture, not necessarily just fit in. And then for the terms, conditions, and privileges, provide training and mentoring that gives workers of all backgrounds the opportunity, skill, and experience and information necessary to perform well. So just as a reminder, we do have the new supervisor guide that's under walter.orem.org, under more stuff, and then supervisor information. Right in that section under discrimination and harassment laws, we go into very specific detail on different discrimination and harassment laws that you need to be aware of and how we can avoid these types of situations. And this will be a review for some of you who went to a previous supervisor training where we discussed in more detail about harassment and discrimination. But I just wanted to do a quick review of this. Does anybody know the age discrimination and harassment law? Do you know what age that is that you qualify under that age and discrimination harassment? What age do you have to be to fall into that category?
Isn't that 40 years old?
That's right, Jason. Thanks. Yep. So an example of a harassment under something like that would be maybe making an offensive remark about a person's age, or derogatory comments about somebody who's older about their abilities. Maybe, okay, boomer, the computers were around before you were around. Those kind of things aren't appropriate in the workplace. So just be careful to make sure that you don't harass anybody or discriminate against anybody due to their age. Anybody familiar with the equal pay and compensation discrimination? The Equal Pay Act, anybody familiar with that? So the Equal Pay Act requires that men and women in the same workplace be given equal pay for equal work. So it doesn't mean that the jobs have to be exactly the same, but if they are very similar, substantially equal, then the equal pay needs to come into play. The genetic information discrimination, harassment, that's a little bit more difficult and something that doesn't come up as often, but it's also called GINA, and that's concerned primarily with protecting individuals who may just be discriminated against because an employer thinks they are at an increased risk of acquiring a condition in the future. So an example of that would be that you as a supervisor don't give an employee a promotion only due to the fact that you think that that additional stress by taking on that promotion might lead to a heart attack because of their previous genetic history. And then national origin, that's from Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. You cannot discriminate based on the applicant or the employee's national origin. That includes birthplace, ancestry, culture, accent, their ability or their association with specific ethnic groups. So you're not able to harass someone because of their national origin or make derogatory or offensive remarks about their national origin, accent, or ethnicity. Then for race and color discrimination, harassment can include racial slurs, offensive or derogatory remarks about a person's race or color, or the display of racially or offensive symbols in the workplace. Religious discrimination and harassment, an example of that would be making offensive remarks about a person's religious beliefs or their practices. Just remember that we try and keep our religious beliefs separate from the workplace as much as possible. Then sex discrimination and harassment. That would be something where you treat somebody unfavorably because they associate themselves as a particular gender or gender identity. So just be careful that we as supervisors take our responsibility to address any of these issues that might happen in your team as soon as possible, to make sure that we can all have a place that's safe from discrimination and harassment. So let's look for a minute on how we can improve our teams as far as it comes down to diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and mitigating our risk of harassment. So what we can do is look for ways to improve belonging in your team. That can be by having more individual conversations with those that you feel are underrepresented in meetings, or other activities. Try blind job applicant screening. We've done that recently for both our fire and police chief applications. They've been doing some questionnaires, and we de-identified anything that would give the scorers the ability to be able to figure out who these people were, just to make sure that they were a clear screening and scoring of those people's abilities to do the job, instead of previous history that some might have with them. In the reference sheet that I'll be sending out, there's a Harvard implicit test that you can take. I took one yesterday and I was surprised by the results. Just knowing some of my implicit biases helps me to be more cognizant when I come into situations, to watch for my blind spots and make sure that I'm not using unconscious biases when I'm making decisions. So I would recommend that you take the opportunity to take one of those Harvard implicit bias tests. I will send you the link. It really is eye-opening to see some of your biases that you may not think that you have. Something new that we've discussed this week as I was preparing for this presentation is that we will remove the question where we ask candidates their minimum salary requirements and their previous salary history. That's been known to be one way that minorities and females have less of an equal standing when it comes to negotiation and hiring pay for their starting wages. So we're working on having that removed, just so that we can make sure that everybody has an equal standing when it comes to hiring. And then lastly, share with others your ideas to improve diversity, inclusion, and belonging, not just with other supervisors, but with those in your team, so that they can be more cognizant and aware of their decisions, and so that they can try and help improve the team as well. So don't try and solve everything at once. Try and think of something that's a bite-sized piece of some way that you can improve your team's ability to be more belonging. And you're not alone. You can always ask for help with your coworkers, with other supervisors, with Jason or myself. We're always here to help you in any way that you might need to help improve your diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So I really liked this graphic right here. We talk about equality and equity hand in hand a lot, and they're spelled very similarly, but they're actually very different. On the graphic on the left-hand side, you'll notice that everyone has been given the same tools to be able to see the game. Everybody was given a box, but you notice that the person on the left-hand side is taller than the other two, so he's able to stand up on the box and be able to see the entire game with a very good view. You notice that the girl in the middle, she's got the same size box. She has the same opportunity here as the person to her left, but she can barely see over the fence, so she can see part of the game. And then we have somebody who has the same tools, the same box, but they don't have the ability to get up onto the box because they're disabled in a wheelchair, so they aren't able to see the game at all. And the difference with that in equity is that we look at everybody on an individual basis on how we can help them better achieve the goal. And the goal here is to be able to see the game. So the person on the left-hand side, on the equity side, is tall, probably doesn't need a box at all to be able to see the game. They can see the game just fine without it. The girl in the middle, she may need a little more tools and a little more help from you as a supervisor to be able to see the game. So you'll give her those extra tools that you have in your toolbox to be able to help her have equity with those around her. And then in the final, on the right-hand side, sometimes we need to create our own tools and our own format, our own ideas on how we can help some of those people in our team so that they have equity with the other people in your team. So I really liked this graphic that shows that even though we all have the same tools, sometimes some of us need different tools or different accommodations so that we have equity in our teams. And I just want to close out by this new idea of micro-inclusion. So sometimes, like Shar said, we get really overwhelmed when we, especially with things that are going on in the outside world right now, sometimes we really get overwhelmed and maybe we're ashamed by maybe some of our past behavior or our inability to make more differences and changes in our own teams or in our own homes. So this new idea we call micro-inclusion, and it's a symbolic action that forces us to recall the humanity of others. And it's a small step to include someone. So my plea to you is to just make a goal with yourself. Don't feel like we need to jump into everything all at once and take on more than we can handle, but just think of one small thing, one small step that you can do to improve that belonging and that feeling of being part of a team, especially in those individuals that you directly supervise. Just see what you can do to try and make everyone feel like they have equity in the team. And with that, that is all that I have. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share or anything that's going on in their individual departments that they as managers and leaders have any management type questions that maybe we can address today, in particular with your teams that maybe we haven't covered in the past supervisor trainings, or something that's going on in your team that you'd like to throw out to the group for advice? Okay, then with that, Jason and I would just like to thank you for joining the training. When we originally started these trainings, they were supposed to be half-day in-person trainings, but due to COVID, we've shortened them down to just a little under 2 hours. It's about an hour and a half. But I feel like we've thrown a lot of information at you. We appreciate all of your input and sharing. I apologize, especially with the chat message. I wasn't able to watch at the same time as I was speaking as much as I'd like to, so I apologize for those of you who participated in that. But I do appreciate everyone who did participate, whether verbally or just through thinking through things in their mind and didn't feel comfortable with sharing. So with that, we appreciate all that you do. You are what makes Orem better, and we will do this training again next month. So watch out in your email boxes for the next training. And for those who did participate, we'll be sending out these Cubby gift cards via inter-office mail, so be watching for those. So thank you.
Keri,
Keri,
this is Jason. Sorry. Along with that, I just wanted to add that the topics that we're covering, Keri and I can't always come up with good topics in the sense that we need your advice. We need your help as supervisors to, if there's areas of concerns or issues, things that are current, please call us. Please let us know that we can add those topics to our trainings and make it applicable to all of us. So with that, just remember, we need you. We need your help as well. But we want to keep these different each month, and but in line with the needs of our organization. So again, I just wanted to say thank you as well.